Hi, how's it going guys? Origami here, welcome back to the channel, and today we're gonna do another deck profile. It's not necessarily a meta deck because I find doing deck profiles on meta decks so boring, but this is going to be, I think, an interesting and enjoyable one for most of you guys. Today we have the Water Darkness Dragon Bone deck, and this deck revolves around zombie dragons and more specifically this card, Dragon Bone Secret Wicked Dragon, which is a new card from the DMPP18 set with a new mechanic called Attack Chance. I've been wanting to be able to make shorter and more effective content, so let's just dive right into it. People generally regard it as an OTK deck. To me, this is very strictly a combo deck first and foremost. I'm going to go over the important cards and interactions that you need to understand before going through the rest of the deck. Otherwise it's going to be very confusing for you because, like I said, it's a combo deck, so the combo is the most important thing. The main card, of course, like I said, Dragon Bone Secret Wicked Dragon. Effect is Attack Chance Zombie Dragon. Put a non-evolution zombie dragon from your graveyard into the battle zone. So Attack Chance is essentially an ability on spells that can be cast for no cost when your creatures attack. So essentially, when this card is in your hand and one of your zombie dragons attack, you can put another zombie dragon from your graveyard into the battle zone for free. And what you're going to be mainly targeting is actually this card, a very familiar one, Babelginus Demonic Dragon. If you play in the Ballcadeias decks, you already know what it does. When it enters the battle zone, you may destroy another creature. If you do, that creature's owner search their graveyard for a non-evolution creature other than Babelginus and puts it into the battle zone. I don't know why the phrasing is this way, but actually you can destroy Babelginus itself. It's not necessarily another creature that you have to destroy, and then pretty much you can put any non-evolution creature from your graveyard, of course, into the battle zone. And I think you guys can already start to see what kind of cheese that we're cooking up. So the general combo would be, you mill some Babelginus and other bomb cards into the graveyard, attack with a zombie dragon, proc Dragon Bone for free, summon Babelginus from the graveyard, proc Babelginus' effect to put that bomb creature into the battle zone. It might be a little confusing. Essentially the potential of this play is insane. You can possibly get any non-evolution creature you can imagine into the battle zone at turn 4. And with this strategy in mind, we can see that the kind of cards that we would need are like mill, to mill Babelginus and other bomb cards into the graveyard, cheap zombie dragons that can proc Dragon Bone early and Babelginus itself, and the bombs that we want to summon at the end of the game. For those of you who are confused, bombs in my lingo is good stuff that you want to play essentially. So with this understanding, I'm going to go through the deck list as quickly as possible. Our early game mill / graveyard fertilization that we will need. We play 2 of Aqua Melge once per turn. During your turn, whenever another one of your creatures enters the battle zone, you may discard 1, draw 1 card. We have Deepsea Typhoon, a creature, draw 1, discard 1. Emergency Typhoon, draw 2, discard 1. Atsuto, Dual Hero Strategist, draw 2, discard 2. And that's it for the mill section of the early game. We then have 3 of the Fuuma Gorgonshack. We've seen this before, a very meta specific card. Spells cost 2 more to cast, and of course that impacts us with Emergency Typhoon and Dragon Bone itself. But you know, Emergency Typhoon to 4 is pretty manageable, or you know, we can just charge it and use another mill instead. And you know, Dragon Bone, we want to play it off its attack chance, so its added cost doesn't really impact it too much in that sense. Although that said, you have to be aware sometimes you do have to cast Dragon Bone off your hand in very select few instances. Then you might have to think twice about using Gorgonshack. But you know, in the current meta, Gorgonshack, like you guys already know, a very good card to slow down your opponents and gives you less pressure in the early to mid game, be it for ramp spells or their hyperspatial hold spells. Next up, we have the zombie dragons. We play 4 of Necrodragon Vaisas. Whenever this attacks, returns one of your shields to your hands. You can't use the shield trigger effect. A 3 mana zombie dragon, pretty much the earliest thing you can get. Returning a shield to your hand when you're attacking, when you're going for aggro, is more of a good thing than a bad thing generally. And then we have 4 of Necrodragon Halberd. When this enters the battle zone, put the top 4 cards of your deck into your graveyard. So it mills 4. Slayer, 4 mana zombie dragon with a built-in 4-card mill, which helps the deck even more in case you're missing some stuff, you know, by the time your turn 4, maybe you've only gotten like 1 or 2 mils off. The Slayer on this creature actually goes a long way, especially if you're not going for an OTK and you end up trading a lot of your opponent's answers with this guy, which is just adds more value when you've already used its main effect. We then play 2 of Necrodragon Odol Needle, Shield Trigger, enters the battle zone tapped. Whenever any of your opponent's creatures attacks, they have to attack this creature if able. When it battles, destroy this creature and the opponent's creatures after the battle. So it's a defensive shield trigger first and foremost. I think it's the only defensive shield trigger in this deck. A zombie dragon deck can proc Dragon Bone, but outside of that, it's not really an optimal play for the combo at all, because at 6 mana you can cast Dragon Bone on your next turn for 7 mana already. There's no point in summoning Odol Needle at 6 and then on turn 7 proccing the attack chance. That said, it's a plausible option for Dragon Bone to summon if you're in a pinch, or you just have spare Dragon Bones and you just want some shield or defensive measure, a good layer of protection that fits the general theme, even though it's not efficient for the combo. Of course, maybe if you're going against a rush deck, this comes off a shield trigger, all of a sudden you don't have to summon that cheap Necrodragon Halberd or Vaisas, so then you can mill more instead and then still use Odol Needle to proc Dragon Bone. So that's the use of Odol Needle, but because it's not that efficient, we only play 2 of it. And then of course we have the 4 Babelginus as well as the 4 Dragon Bone that we've elaborated on earlier, the key components of the deck pretty much, and the last 5 cards are the bombs, essentially what you want to summon when you actually pull off your combo. Essentially, you can go with anything that's eligible for Babelginus. You can go with EMK if you like, you can go with Onimaru Head, Bronze Arm Tribe, you know. These are just the ones that I personally went with. I went with 2 Zabi Mira, the Reviving Shaman. ETB, you may destroy any number of your own creatures, then for each creature destroyed this way, put a psychic creature that costs 6 or less from your Hyperspatial Zone into the battle zone. So of course, as with any deck that plays Zabi Mira, you're generally looking for Gallows if possible, and if you can't get Gallows, usually Zabi Mira itself isn't that optimal a play. But you know, Gallows at turn 4 is generally too difficult for any opponent to overcome, which is why it's probably the best option if you do have that 3 spare creatures on your battle zone to summon Gallows. Next up, I play 1 codename Yabasgil skill. Yabasgil skill. Very trippy word. Enter the battle zone or attacks, you may return a dragon or creature that costs 7 or more from your graveyard to your hand, then destroy one of your opponent's creatures that cost 6 or less. I included this card because this is one that you don't have to rely on the RNG of Babelginus. In case you guys didn't know, despite its wording, Babelginus actually gives you 3 creatures to choose from when you proc its effect, not the entire list of graveyard for you to choose. So in the event that you think you might have too many things in the graveyard that might screw with Babelginus' RNG in that sense, you might want to consider summoning Yabasgil from Dragon Bone itself, and then you can nuke one of your opponent's creatures as a defensive measure, and then also trim your graveyard by removing cards that you don't want to get from Babelginus' effect, and then add it to your hand, and then you can charge it as mana or play it later on, doesn't matter. So this is pretty much a safety pick from me to sort of counteract Babelginus' RNG in that sense. Next up, 1 of Bolmeteus Black Dragon. Enter the battle zone, nuke one of your opponent's creatures. When it breaks a shield, send it to the graveyard instead, so it's a shield burn, so the shield trigger doesn't proc and they don't get it in their hand. So essentially I was thinking of creatures that can shield burn because I think that's one of the best ways you can continue to push and be aggressive with this kind of deck. And of course the premier burn option is always Wedding, which you can include in this deck, but FYI, all these Zenith effects for Wedding, Lionel, all of them are not strictly enter the battle zone. They are more of a on play / on summon effect, which means if you actually get Wedding through Babelginus or any of these kind of cheat effects, it generally would not proc its Shieldify effect. And on top of that, it has Eternal Omega, which makes it go back to your hand when it's removed, which is actually not good for this deck because you would never reach 11 mana charged. And generally you would still prefer it to be in the graveyard for another Babelginus to go off probably. And you know, you could definitely still use Wedding. I would say it's still a triple breaker shield burn, and in that sense it's better than Bolmeteus Black. But I think personally for Bolmeteus Black, it just fits the deck a little bit more. Doesn't have the Eternal Omega and still has that nuke on that enter the battle zone effect, so yeah. And last but not least, we have one of Codename Sherlock, a huge creature that completely shuts down psychic decks and cannot be chosen. You know, summoning it against certain decks are an instant win, and in other occasions it's just an unremovable Quattro Breaker beat stick, and it's almost nothing bad about it if you can get it out. And yeah, so that's it for the main deck. The Hyperspatial Zone, I just went with things that Zabi Mira can get out because essentially it's the only card in the deck that has any interaction with the Hyperspatial Zone. So essentially 6 mana and less psychic creatures. Gallows is of course an auto inclusion for me. I think the rest are like up to you, but it generally doesn't matter that much because I wouldn't summon anything other than Gallows, and if I can't summon Gallows, I'm not playing Zabi Mira, that kind of logic, you know, for me. But of course, it's better to have something useful than not. It just generally doesn't matter that much. And yeah, so that's the deck. Some things to note for this deck because it is so intricate in that sense. It's not a meta deck, and there would be 10 other decks that I would implore you to use before using this on ladder. And that having said, when things go right, it is a strong deck. It's not meta only because of its inconsistency, because I'm really not sure there are any decks that can actually achieve the equivalent of a turn 4 Gallows, that kind of power level and that early. And because it's all about the combo, there are games where, you know, either your opponent shuts off your combo in some way, or you just can't draw the cards that you need, where it's pretty much an instant loss. And you sort of have to take that with the good of this deck. Just some games that you just can't win if you don't get your combo cards. I mean, it's true for a lot of other decks as well, but because there isn't much search in that sense, it's just mill and then hoping you hit stuff, you definitely are very prone to just bricking and instantly losing. But because of how fun this deck is, I don't mind it. Just like I said, it's not meta. You also need to make some early decisions and adjustments very quickly in the early game. You know, you need to know what kind of cards you can charge and to play in the early game. It's a very important factor in how successful you ultimately are with this deck, and it's also sort of why my bombs are all, you know, darkness or partial darkness, so that I don't have an issue with mana color, because it's such a fragile early game for, I would say. Of course, all of these cards, you know, in terms of the number of each card, you can replace them. Like I said, the bombs you can literally replace with anything that's eligible for Babelginus. The numbers you can adjust to whatever fits you the best. These are just what I went with. And last but not least, I would say, if you don't have these cards right now, especially Babelginus, you should not craft them if you play ND, because I'm quite sure Babelginus is very close to rotation. This deck would probably not exist in the next set despite how ridiculously fun it is now currently. And I mean, of course, if you're playing AD, that's a different story, but yeah, don't craft it if you don't have it. It's currently listed at tier 4 by Kami Game, and you know what, in terms of consistency, maybe. In terms of the ideal game plan and strategy, I don't really think there's any deck that beats a turn 4 Gallows. And yeah, I think that's all. Because it's not a meta deck, I'll just leave 3 short gameplays at the end of this video, so you know, watch to the end if you want to see how the deck runs. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and found this deck interesting. If you did, do help me drop a like on it to let me know, and I'll keep making more videos just like this one. If you're new here, do consider subscribing to the channel to stay up to date with more Duel Masters plays and more mobile gaming content. Forget about the notification bell, just subscribing would mean a lot to me. And yeah, that's all. Stay safe, bye bye.
Odol 戦略やる 驚く戦略ある。石にしてやる。お前はおかえりゴーホー。あっという間に勝利だな。戦略やる。楽しもうじゃないか。 撃だオラ